Hello, my friend. It is Sunday evening, November 9th, 2025, about 7:45 p.m. here on the East Coast of the United States. And I would like to encourage you to skip this broadcast if you're sort of tight for time. We're going to make this as brief as possible. We're going to touch on Canaan and specifically discuss what to do if you happen to be somebody who still owns shares of Canaan. Hey, what might be next for the company's share price? And I want to touch on Bitfarms as well, because of course Bitfarms on, I believe, November 13th, which is later this week, will be releasing their earnings, or, maybe not earnings, losses, but hey, I like to just call it like their investor presentation, right? Where we get to hear more importantly about what the future plans are for the company. What happened in Q3 2025 is somewhat less material, given the fact that, hey, I think the stock price is really going to be moved one way or the other based on what the near term holds for the company. So feel free to listen to this at double the speed if need be, but let's just go ahead and dig right into it. Okay, my friend. So if you happen to be somebody who still owns shares of Canaan, and perhaps you got into shares of Canaan not at under $1 a share, but at some point over $1 a share, and you're saying to yourself, hey, I'm a little bit concerned now because, I see that the price, yes, it's been hovering above $1 a share, but it seems to have lost some of its momentum. Hey, there's been talk about some additional financing, capital raising on the part of the company. The price of Bitcoin really kind of rolled over. Hash prices are completely disastrous. What should I do? What's going on? So this isn't investment advice, right? Hey, but I'll share some thoughts that you may find to be useful, right? So first, let me preface all of this by pointing out that I mentioned Canaan in the context of something I chose to do, which is to remove, right, my original investment in Bitfarms back under $1 a share, just to kind of take a little bit of money off the table. I rolled it into Canaan, just that portion of it. And, I wrote out in my journal, right, some very clear price points at which I would very seriously consider selling shares of Canaan. And I posted a snippet of that on X. So again, I've said this before, if you don't follow me on X, please consider doing so, because I will share things on X that it's just not as practical to share here on YouTube. So with that said, I pretty clearly articulated what I thought were some really good potential exit points, like $1.64, which for me would have been 100% return, $2 a share, another really good exit point. And so I took advantage of those exit points as they materialized and dramatically, lightened up right on shares of Canaan. I'm grateful that the company came back into listing compliance with NASDAQ. I continue to be incredibly grateful for Canaan's, I think, willingness to work with, smaller entities right back in the day in terms of their Bitcoin mining machines, which continue to be, I think, exceptional values. And so I'm just really, really excited and happy that Canaan came back into listing compliance. Hey, they've announced some incredibly meaningful orders, right, for Bitcoin mining machines. And I sense that the company's on the right path. I did notice that there were a number of voices on X, talking about share prices like, hey, $100 a share, things like that. Listen, hey, never say never, but let's kind of keep this real for a moment, all right? We need to see the price of Bitcoin, specifically the price of Bitcoin and hash prices, really turn around in a hurry, right? And really start to maybe set some all-time highs if we are to see shares of Canaan really, really appreciate substantially. I still think Canaan has every bit of a chance to get up to the roughly $2.50 range. Right? If I'm not mistaken, that's about where the consensus price target is for the company as set by Wall Street professionals who do this vocationally for a living, right? So I think those prices, or that price point, makes a lot of sense. I tend to show up to parties early and then leave early. So people sometimes, rightfully so, they critique the fact that it's like, why are you unloading, or why are you lightening up? Don't you want to hold out for, Canaan getting to 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, whatever, $1,000 a share, whatever crazy number, right, people have in their mind as being where this company's share price is going. I just sort of, hey, look, we all have to make our own decisions. I think 100% return is enough. Like, I'm okay with that. Yes, I want you to get that 1,000, 10,000 up, 100,000% return. That's awesome. But for me, 100% is okay, Now, to the topic of like, hey, but like I bought shares of Canaan at $1.20 or maybe $1.30, and I'm like underwater now. Any thoughts on what I should do? Well, Canaan themselves are coming out with their investor presentation, if I'm not mistaken, later this week. Hey, it'll be interesting to see what the company says. I do think it's meaningful and interesting and very thought-provoking that the company appears to be positioning themselves as an auxiliary entity to assist with data centers that are choosing to basically have HPC AI, data centers. In other words, they're positioning themselves, it seems, in a way that allows a smaller Bitcoin mining footprint to also exist, right? To be co-located at these facilities so that there's some degree of optionality as to what to do with loads that may not all be fully, being used for HPC AI. I think this isn't the broadcast to kind of dive into a bunch of details about that. I think I'll let you maybe read up on that a bit more, but they have made some very, I think, meaningful announcements that could potentially, right, change the perception of Canaan a little bit, right? Hey, they have decided, we want to be a Bitcoin, we manufacture Bitcoin mining machines, right? We do a lot of Bitcoin mining ourselves, right? And in addition to that, we as a company, meaning Canaan, we're also very, very focused on, accelerating our position as a company that seeks to just be like a Bitcoin-centric business, right? Through our HODL, both not just of Bitcoin, but also of Ethereum. Very sizable HODL, last update we got from them. So these are all things that I think are very positive for the company, but let's keep it real. Shares of Canaan are going to trade in sympathy with the price of Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin is going to go into a crypto winter, shares of Canaan are probably going to be under some degree of stress, right? Can there be a re-rating where the company really sees their share price go up to like, hey, $3, $4, maybe $5 a share, if suddenly they are perceived by the market as being not a direct HPC AI participant, but as a participant that can actually help facilitate the management of electrical loads as it relates to HPC AI data center locations? Hey, that could be very interesting. But again, it's the kind of thing where we'd really need to dig deeper into that. And I think at this point, hey, with your investor presentation coming up, wait, see what happens, see what the company announces, and kind of assess from there. It's a tough situation. I think, it's frustrating, right? When it's like, hey, we talked about Canaan sub $1 a share on these broadcasts. I get that sometimes, like, hey, you don't see the broadcast and then you catch it later and then it's like, oh, the stock already went up. Hey, maybe I'll sort of take a chance on it. You get in and then all of a sudden the share price has maybe it went up after you bought it, but you're like, hey, but I think it may go up even higher. And then it kind of comes back down. That's frustrating. I've been there and it's no fun. And it can be very, very unsettling if you're not entirely sure, like, well, what's next for Canaan? And I would just say the biggest risk to Canaan right now, the biggest risk, bar none, is that we could be potentially going into a crypto winter, right? If the so-called 4-year cycle holds true and the price of Bitcoin slumps going into 2026, I think that's going to put pressure on shares of Canaan. But let's see what happens, and maybe start thinking about cutting some losses. Unfortunately, right? Like, hey, if you think, Bitcoin may not really be going back up anymore this year, and maybe it is going to slip into a crypto winter, consider paring back on Canaan, right? While it's still where it's at, so to speak. Again, this is an investment advice. I'm just kind of sharing some thoughts that would be going through my head if I were in a similar situation, because I've been there and I've had to make these difficult decisions sometimes, right? It sucks. Again, I like to get to the party early, and then I tend to want to leave a bit early. If you want to call, 100% later, early, hey, I'll take it, whatever. Bitfarms. Okay, Bitfarms has their investor presentation later this week as well. As we've discussed ad nauseum on these broadcasts, Bitfarms has to produce more than just a picture of a bulldozer clearing some trees for a future site of a data center, right? I mean, that's cool. Hey, whatever. But I think we need to see a customer, right? We need to see something, even if it's like a pilot project, customer, maybe if it's a customer who's not even a customer, but rather just a letter of intent participant, right? Hey, we have a letter of intent from a company that's telling us that if we actually manage to buy the land and maybe do some civil works on the land and maybe finally get it to a point where we have like a substation and we have some of the infrastructure, maybe at that point they'll consider becoming a customer. All right, even that I think would be better than just nothing. Now, let me set the expectation for you. I am not banking on there being a customer of any kind announced between now and the investor presentation. I want to be wrong. I mean, yes, I would love for nothing more than for Bitfarms to just hit it out of the park with a blockbuster announcement, right? With a major, say, hyperscaler or a major neocloud company, right? Or a major, corporation that everybody would be familiar with saying, you know what? They want all 350 some odd megawatts of electricity that's going to eventually be at Panther Creek by the end of 2027. And they want to lock that in now because they don't want to find themselves having to compete with other entities down the road as the data center slowly but surely gets built. That would be amazing. I'm just not going to expect it right now. I'm just not expecting it. And I know there are those who say patience, but bear in mind that this past week, the US equity markets really kind of came under some pressure. Specifically, there were a lot of headlines that talked about, hey, analysts are concerned about AI, valuations and things like that, right? That's also my concern, right? Like, hey, what happens if you have the air come out of the AI bubble, if you want to call it that, right? What happens if the air comes out of that bubble? What happens if the United States just kind of like slow rolls into a recession that's not just a garden variety recession, but one that kind of hits pretty deep and that's pretty powerful? What does that do to the potential for Bitfarms to land a multi-billion dollar customer at Panther Creek? On the one hand, maybe it does nothing to that, right? Maybe there will still be billions of dollars to pour into a proposed data center at Panther Creek by a neocloud or a hyperscaler. But what if that doesn't materialize? What if the decision is, hey, you know what? Like, we're going to kind of like not spend so much money. We're going to work with what we've got. And we're going to kind of see how the landscape evolves over the next couple of years. That could be problematic if the stock price, right, for Bitfarms is, it going up higher is contingent upon the idea that the company is going to actually transition out of Bitcoin mining and get into the HPC AI data center business. Well, if that's the case, then you need to have a customer at some point. I'm not convinced that you can spend billions of dollars building data centers that are empty and that somehow translates into shareholder value of any lasting, of any lasting value, if that makes sense, right? I mean, sure, you could build it and you can say, hey, if we build it, they'll come. But if the economy is just upside down, I think we've seen this before in other industries, right? Where it's like there's a lot of speculative building and then all of a sudden things change and maybe technology evolves and suddenly it's like, hey, we don't need 350 megawatts. We could do what we wanted to do in 350 megawatts. We could do it in 35 megawatts. And things can slowly evolve and the market just kind of slips away and the opportunity vanishes. So yeah, I'm not trying to be a hater or be down on things, dude. I'm a proponent of what Bitfarms is doing. I'm a huge proponent. Particularly because Panther Creek, was owned by Stronghold Digital Mining. And I'm, like, this is in my backyard. I'm passionate about both Scrubgrass and Panther Creek living into their full potential as sites, right? I really, really am. But I'm also trying to kind of keep it real here and not just say, yeah, guys, you know what? There's going to be a multi-billion-dollar deal tomorrow, then another one after that. And another, come on, let's be real. As far as I know, I'll have to double check the property records. I don't even know that Bitfarms has acquired the damn land yet upon which the data center at Panther Creek is proposed to be built. I'll have to double check that. Okay. Maybe the transaction closed a short while ago and it'll show up in the public record, but I'm just trying to keep it real. What are we talking about? Artistic renderings. We're talking about potentially land that the company doesn't even own yet. So, I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. I want there to be a blockbuster announcement. I'm just not going to expect it. And I would encourage you to calibrate your expectations accordingly. Okay, my friend, with all of that said, we're definitely going to be getting together again later this week. I'm excited to do so, and I'm excited to see what Bitfarms and Canaan have to say in their investor presentations. Okay, let's stay positive, let's be great, and we will definitely see each other again soon.